trying a different Wi-Fi now.
Move to a first world country, they said. It'll be fun, they said.
I know. It's bad, hey? You would think it's good here, but it's not. I have like a coax cable in for my TV that gives me internet. Can you believe that? I have
Don't shed your
TV-based
electricity
internet.
or bandwidth. You be the judge.
Ah, terrible. No fiber.
So let's kick it off without further ado. So first of all, a massive thank you to Tom. You've pioneered a new way of doing tech sessions, and I think this new way is genius. And the reason it's genius, and I'm speaking for myself particularly, is I'm quite a slow learner and a slow typer. So to being able to pause the video between like keystrokes was a massive help for me, because I could actually sort of keep up. So it was absolutely brilliant. It was self-paced. I could spend a few evenings between 11 and 12 at night trying to just fiddle with stuff. And I thought it was absolutely awesome. So it was brilliant. I loved your way of giving over the material. It was very engaging. It was the background information was absolutely awesome. And I think for me, the real advantage is it was the questions that hit me after I had done the session that I think is going to be where today's all about. It's all about we're expecting everyone to have gone through the let's call it the Web3 for developer YouTube video. It was and have actually absorbed some of the tech and absorbed some of the questions. Really, it's about the questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone was talking.
Someone was talking. Yeah. It was Michael.
Apologies. Sorry, I'm not on mute. Sorry.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to kick off with one or two questions, and I'd like to see just from a thought point of view, and then actually just let other people. Happy for you to type in questions in the chat, and I can read them out, or just unmute and just throw some questions at Tom. So
well, and they don't only have to be for me. I think it's like
it's for the audience.
I think there's probably a whole bunch of open-ended questions as well, which everyone may bring a different perspective to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose my first question is, in the extreme, assuming that this is the new killer technology, is this the death of the server as we know it? The traditional server?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. And I would say yes, like if you take it to its complete extreme, I think that is the idea. Well, this is certainly an architecture towards that concept of like absolutely everything you do on the internet is a financial transaction in some respect. And if you think about it, like actually everything you do on the internet probably is a financial transaction. It might not be directly. So like if I go and I Google search for something, I'm just searching for whatever, like new shoes or something. Like that is actually a financial transaction. From a Google perspective, they're very excited to know that Tom is looking for shoes. They're also very excited to present me with some of the search results from their partners that pay them to give those ads back. They're also very interested to direct my clicks through to Amazon or whatever, and they may receive some referrals through that. So actually everything I do on the internet probably does indirectly and sometimes directly have a financial benefit to it. So you could start to say that Web3 is really the framework for making every transaction on the internet like financially a peer-to-peer transaction between two parties. So like that would be my like default. Of course, I think when you actually get into the nitty-gritty and into the detail of it, that may not be it may not always be the case that's entirely true. And so the old internet, is maybe something you would still use. But I'd say if you're a Web3 maximalist, that is probably what you deeply believe is the destination.
Okay, so I've got some questions that have been posted on the chat. So the one is and I don't understand this question. Is this
just a joke?
Yeah.
Silicon Valley's decentralized internet ? And I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, ignore that.
Yeah,
Ignore
I
that
also-
one. That's just a joke.
You're gonna have to explain it, Gaskell, because I haven't watched enough Silicon Valley.
he comes up with
Wasn't it
the main
Piper
character, I
Coin?
think. Yeah, it
Was
was.
it like that?
Was it? No, it was before that. He creates this decentralized internet that can run on everybody's phone, through shared processing.
Yeah,
But it wasn't this. But the direction is pretty much the same.
yeah, but actually, like that is there's something called the Ethereum World Computer, and it's not that popular. They don't promote it that much anymore. But when Ethereum was like in its early days, I think you can Google for this thing, the Ethereum World Computer. I don't know. Maybe it was like a series of blog posts or something like that. And really, the idea of that was that it was like, well, everybody on the Ethereum in the Ethereum ecosystem should run an Ethereum node, and therefore add to the computing power of the overall network. And by running a node, you can earn some fees. So by you putting compute and storage power into the network, you could earn some fees as a miner. And when you interact with the internet, you should interact with the internet through your own node. So that way you consume, and you're a consumer and a producer on the network. And that was like an early, I still think that's like a very interesting idea, isn't it? I mean, like if I've got a laptop, why shouldn't it just be in its like idle time, earning a tiny bit of fee, running other people's code, as long as it's kind of done in a secure way, and it's like why not, right? So like you could imagine like Amazon or AWS has built their business on that. They buy up a supply of compute and then they sell it through their own portal with AWS. But like, why wouldn't I just, as Tom, I've got like one computer on my desk, I've got another computer under my desk. Those things could just be turned on, plugged into the network, and in their idle time, like earn, a couple of dollars a day by running and contributing to a network. Isn't that quite interesting? There's an interesting token called the BAT, the Basic Attention Token, which is, or just to give you another example of like this actually being realized, is if you look at BAT, the Basic Attention Token, it is built into, I think, the Brave browser, and I think you can build it into MetaMask as well. But the idea of that is that you can earn, as a consumer of the internet, every time you see an ad, you can take part in the revenue of that ad. So you can earn a bit of currency for looking at ads that are presented to you. And so the idea of BAT is that advertisers and consumers are connected directly without there being a middleman like Google or Amazon or Facebook in between. So with BAT, we could, as Synthesis, say, hey, we want to advertise to people. So we put our ads on the BAT network. And then anyone who ends up seeing our ads, we end up paying a tiny amount of cash to it. Could be like 1 cent or something for every person who sees a Synthesis ad. They earn 1 cent. And so what is the cost of that to us? It's just 1 cent per ad impression. There's no one else in between. That's quite an interesting idea. So with BAT, and then BAT is a token itself, has got value, so it's tradable, that kind of stuff. So you could end up with companies who hire people to look at ads so that they can earn BAT, and then they can create a marketplace for BAT back to US dollars, which is like, it's quite crazy. But that really is like, there's like an end idea there, which is very disruptive to advertising companies like Google, Facebook, who are the big tech monsters, right? So BAT is highly disruptive. Anyway, I think I've gotten off the original question, which was like the decentralized internet. But yeah, that Google for Ethereum World Computer.
Yeah, so then the number of people with their hands up, but I just know that Drickus actually posted some questions earlier. So I'd like Drickus to maybe have an opportunity just to speak out your question.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, cool. Yeah, so the first one is, I think, let me add on to this conversation we're having about this decentralized computer. So I just added a link to a company called Definity. They are building what they call the internet computer. And it's like exactly the same idea, like a decentralized, like every computer runs their own like little piece of the internet. And I also linked their white paper. So my question is, Tom, Ethereum gas fees are like stupid. So the other day I wanted to move a bit of Ethereum from a staking pool back to MetaMask, and the transaction fee was like a third of
the value. Yeah.
Value. So
Yeah.
I think, how about using something like Polygon instead of Ethereum for like lower transaction fees? How would that be different from the way that you did it? Yeah, just generally using other networks instead of Ethereum and their high gas fees.
Yeah, totally. So you've got to keep in mind the history. Ethereum is very old, 2012, 14 or something, 2013, around there. And it is based on like the ideas that were inspired by Bitcoin, which is like everybody shares one huge blockchain. Well, back then it was a very small blockchain, and so everyone thought, actually, blockchains are these very lightweight things. But obviously, like over time, they have no ability to to truncate, I suppose is the way of saying it. Like a transaction that was submitted onto Ethereum back in 2014 is still available to be able to see in the blockchain in every node that participates in the network. And so, back in the early days of these things like being able to, I think you would call it like maybe sharding now, or scalability, scaling the blockchain, were like not built into the architecture of the original Ethereum nor the original Bitcoin. So they were built on this like single one big blockchain for all, with blocks appending all, and there was no ability to make them to truncate them. I think back then they were designing against Moore's law, which was like every 18 months technology and storage space should cheapen by half, or double or double if it's compute. And probably Moore's law is maybe no longer the case. I don't know if storage space halves every 18 months from a cost perspective. I don't think it does. And so maybe that was not a good early assumption. So now you're seeing, so you can call Bitcoin a generation 1 blockchain. It was really the first. Ethereum is, you could consider a generation 2 blockchain. So it really added smart contracts and the ability to run computation on that blockchain. And now you see this emergence of generation 3 blockchains, which are like, they're built out of the learnings of the generation 2 blockchains. So Cardano, NEAR protocol, and Solana, and there's a bunch. Like maybe even this Dfinity is probably another one. There's literally millions of generation 3 blockchains, which are all architected to solve scalability. So that is that problem of them becoming very expensive to run. You're paying a lot to run a transaction on the Ethereum blockchain, because every transaction you put onto the Ethereum blockchain lives in everyone's memory forever. I mean, that's quite a high cost. So you're paying the cost of the storage of that stupid Drickus transaction for all time in every node's memory, right? So it's expensive. And until Ethereum solves that problem, those fees will remain high. They are planning to solve them. There's something called Ethereum 2.0. I think it used to be called Project Casper, but it's been talked about since like 2017. For a long time, it's very difficult to roll out big infrastructure changes onto a running blockchain. It is very difficult. And so, but that will come. Ethereum 2.0 hopefully will come one day, and that should solve the scalability problem. They're thinking about like sharding transactions into different like sort of node groups or whatever. And that should help. But like the newer blockchains, which don't have this baggage of history with them, they can design that in from day one without without any issues. So, and so they have. So like Cardano definitely solves it, NEAR solves it, and a bunch of others solve this like scalability problem. Another thing they add is like much higher performance. So Ethereum is, although it's pretty fast compared to Bitcoin, it's very fast. It's still very slow for web transactions. So it's like Ethereum's about 12 seconds per block, which is pretty crappy if you're going to submit a transaction on every click event. Like 12 seconds to get your response is pretty slow. Bitcoin is much slower. It's about 10 minutes. NEAR and Cardano, etc., are like sub 1 second. So Cardano, I think, block is about every second. or they call it, it's not every block. You'll know, Drickus, you did the Pioneers course. I can't remember. I think the block is every 10 seconds, but a slot. Yeah, a slot is every 1 second. So they've kind of created this like sub-block idea. And then near, I think it's 400 milliseconds. So it's 0.4 seconds per block, which is like much faster. It's much quicker for interactive. And it's like the fees then associated with that are like way, way, way low. The problem is, of course, that the adoption is very low on those blockchains as well. So they're nothing as huge as Ethereum. So it's still like to be seen where this goes. As the adoption goes up, the fees are going to go up, of course. But then we'll see, hopefully, the scalability design of each of those things should still keep a lid on like how far those fees go. But that's still like to be seen where that goes. Currently, Ethereum is the monster from a smart contract perspective today. So I'd say, like, I don't know what it is, but I'd say 99% of all smart contract transactions are running through the Ethereum blockchain. So the other ones don't really have high adoption yet.
Yeah. So Luke, you had your hand up first in the bunch, so off you go.
Hi, Tom. First time caller, long time listener. I love the show, and I love the way you do
Thanks,
the
Luke.
videos. So
cool.
On that format. Going back to the first question, Tom. You know that saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. You know, that makes me think of. So I have concerns that if we exposed a lot more to that, or, you know, then I might not have enough disposable cash to work in this, you know, Web3 environment, if like a lot of that is happening, unless my data, like at the moment, I am the product and my data is like this, you know, I don't even know how valuable I am to these guys. Now, what you're describing is like, well, now I can start to know how valuable I become, because maybe my data can be, so it's not just you looking at the ads, it's the opposite. My data usage, I could pull up and then sell that as cash. So don't you think we have to solve that problem to say the people currently that are the product actually first need to become more aware of how valuable that product is, so that they have enough bloody coin or whatever it's called to participate in Web3. You know, there's like a balance there. We're just unconsciously competent at the moment as like products. No? So don't we need to solve that somehow? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it's totally an interesting problem. It's like if you can't measure it, you can't control it or whatever. Like you don't know how much money.
Right? I can't afford
maybe
it if I don't
maybe
cash in on that. Yeah.
So I mean, you could say, well, how valuable are you to Facebook, very bluntly, by saying, well, look at their revenues, like look at their entire business, divide by number of users, and that's their like per capita, right? That's how much you benefit them. I mean, that's a very blunt way of doing it, but like potentially that gives you some idea of the order of magnitude of your value. Then I think looking at something like BAT is very interesting as well. So like, not to say that it's going to give you like an accurate idea, but it'll give you an idea of the model involved in what BAT is trying to do, where there is no middleman. So advertisers will pass you the full value of that click, per click rate. I mean, if you look at Google Analytics, for example, and I know Synthesis runs Google Analytics on certain things, maybe AWS things or whatever, we can actually pull a report of like the amount of money we pay per click, and it's in the order of dollars, sometimes tens of dollars per click. So that's like one idiot coming, like searching for S3 bucket or something, and Google says, oh, cool, let's match that with Synthesis. And if they click that link, it's like that costs Synthesis $15, potentially for that one click. Now, I would say to you, well, okay, cool. So we know what it's costing Synthesis, the advertiser. How much of that is going to Google, and how much of that value really is translating into Luke hitting that thing? You probably you click that S3 link, you're there, and you're like, oh, it's the wrong site. Close the tab, right? So you've spent exactly 5 seconds on the value there. Google has earned $15. Synthesis has been charged $15 for that. And I would say to you, like, is that economy broken? Probably yes. It probably is broken. Synthesis should be paying much less for those click-throughs and passing that directly to whoever clicked the ad more directly, right? I'm not saying that there's no possibility of a middleman. Of course, there there is the possibility. But what Web3 is trying to do is trying to break that down and make it much more transparent, so that there can be an infinite number of Googles in between and an infinite number of syntheses, and the market will define the price of that click-through. At the moment, like, Google has the monopoly on the front door, right? There is no one other than Google who advertises through Google search, if that makes sense. Same for Facebook. So they're providing the service and they're monetizing the ad revenue. Web3 is saying, actually, maybe we can break that down. Anyone should be able to create a Facebook-like experience and advertise and provide advertising services through to any advertising like marketplace at the back. Like we shouldn't connect content with advertising, maybe, or like those things should be freely open market. That's what BAT is trying to do. I'm not saying that's what I'm trying to do. I'm saying that's what BAT is trying to do. This is a very interesting model, I think. So at the end of the day, you will earn per click through that thing. I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting.
Maybe things like Poppy are laying some sort of foundation where, in combination with Web3 thinking, where like you have the right to your personal information, but maybe it, one day goes further to say, actually, you have the right to your own freaking data, so that you can't just harvest it for free. Actually, the individual, is entitled to some gas, anti-gas price or something, So maybe these are the early days of a world where like a combination of these initiatives, ultimately come together, and then it makes sense. And it's like, no, it's fair and it's not centralized. But anyway, thanks. That's a cool answer.
Well, that's actually a very cool idea, that idea of like taking back my ownership. And I can think my ownership of data, I can actually think of that as a smart contract. Like if I own, if it's my data and I put it in a contract, I can give access to the data in that contract through a cost. You know what I mean? I could totally do that. And who owns that contract? Actually, Tom owns it. I can see in this contract that it is completely owned by me, and I could even build in authentication mechanisms to prove that I'm the owner of it. And I could build identity into it. And then I could even build in the ability to say, yeah, I'm happy to share some of this data with you. And I could provide functions into that smart contract, which have got like payability linked to them. Like you can only gain access to my home address if you call this function and you provide this amount of funding against that transaction. You know what I mean? Like that's interesting.
Thanks, Tom. Cool answer.
Tasso, I think your hand was up next, so go for it.
Awesome stuff. Thanks, Tom. This has really been cool stuff. It's a very interesting space. I have a couple of questions. First one's maybe like a clarifying one, and then leading into like an architectural one. But in your demo, you had like that test net that you were working with. It was interesting. I was wondering how it works with free compute if you still need miners on that network. Are there blockchains that actually have no financial implication that can be used from a functional perspective?
So the question is, why would anyone run a node on your network if they're not going to earn fees? And I would say they may not, right? So Ethereum and a lot of blockchains are based on the fact that that miners are incentivized to run nodes because they earn fees to run on your network. You know what I mean? It's like otherwise, what you really have is like an invitation only. I mean, you could make it public, but why would anyone give up their compute power to your network? You know what I mean? So you have to think of it. Often these blockchains are designed in terms of incentive. You have to incentivize people to provide compute and incentivize people to provide smart contracts on top of it. And that is built into fees. Fundamentally, that has to come out of some sort of economics design.
For sure. I mean, like the thinking kind of came from maybe tracking, like you say in your example, Google add click requests to see what the trail is, functionally, maybe leading from one another to a paper trail that's exposed publicly. But then, anyway, your explanation makes 100% sense, which is like leading into the second one. There's no running away from the hybrid of Web 3 and 2, like you put it, since Web 2 eliminates the need for complexity, satisfying the requirements of just transferring plain information. But then, like also inversely, Web 3 eliminates the complexity of backends for transactional information. Question on that is, have you played around with chaining blockchains? In other words, like a combination of fit-for-purpose blockchains, where one might cost less to using gas fees than another one when creating a DApp or a decentralized autonomous organization?
Yeah. So you can totally do that, and that's what like I think it was Drickus who mentioned Polygon earlier, or maybe it was Michael. Sorry, I think it was you, Mike. Mentioned Polygon. So Polygon is like, you can imagine it like a side chain linked to the Ethereum blockchain. So it kind of settles back onto Ethereum, but it's a smart contract that will allow transactions within it for like a much lower fee, if that makes sense. So it uses, and you can do this. This is a very common pattern. It's like you use Ethereum as like your main blockchain, but then you offer services at a lower level, which settles back to Ethereum up at the top. So you can run, and you call that maybe a side chain or an off chain or something like that. Like you can provide services in an off manner, and then at some point you can settle back to the main chain at the top. And then of course, once it's inside your chain, you can determine whatever fees you like. But at some point when you settle onto the main chain, then you will, then there'll be like an Ethereum transaction. And so often, and so you might say, well, how does that work? Because now I'm doing stuff off chain. How do I know that my transaction will ever make it back on chain? And the answer is often around something like, what do you call it? Thinking of the word collateral. So often what you will do is you will say, I'll put some collateral. So as the provider of the side chain, I will put collateral on the main chain, which is where people will be settled if I don't settle. So that means like the risk is still held in collateral on the main chain. So people can transact with me, and if I end up defrauding them, they've got a claim against some collateral on the main chain, if that makes sense. So it's like almost opening up a line of credit on the main chain, then I can work with my credit off chain, and people using me have got some guarantee back to main chain collateral. So that's kind of the idea of how you build side chains. That's a very high level answer of how to do it.
No, that makes sense. And I'm going to listen to it again slowly later. Thanks.
Yeah,
that's
something
cool.
like that.
All right. No, awesome. Thanks, Tom.
So Michael, you had your hand up next. Go for it.
Cool. So obviously, I mean, Tom, we've chatted about this. I've been looking at like NFTs and the NFT space and stuff like that. And he's back. And I've seen a lot of like pre-built contracts and stuff like that, such as the ERC 721A contract, which lets you do more than one mint for the same price as one. So my question is, do you foresee these pre-built contracts being a thing for most of Web3, or is it going to depend solely on, the application and stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, I think that is the answer. I do think, and that's why you see the success of ERC 721. That's the NFT standard. And I think there's another one called 1151 ERC. So ERC stands for Ethereum Request for Comment. It's like an RFC, but it's for Ethereum specifically. And although it's Ethereum specific, I think NFT is like a concept that's liftable into many different blockchains. And you still might call them ERC 721. I don't know, Craig, strangely, but I think yes. I think that is the answer is yes. You will like the future world of Web3 will be lots and lots of different contracts that have been pre-built and can be then customized and tailored for the particular use case. So you can imagine that what ERC 721, the NFT standard is, it's really just an interface to a smart contract. In the way you would think of an interface in Java or .NET, you have this object that runs on the blockchain, and then I've got this interface that I can speak to it from without knowing concretely what class it is, right? I know that I can call get token or get balance or transfer or something on it. That contract could, of course, have other functions in it, like it could have like an account balance, or it could be holding some other stuff. But through the interface, I can't really see those. I just interact with it at an interface level. That's what an NFT really is, or an ERC 721. It's just an interface to a smart contract. So typically people are using NFTs for like sharing images and stuff, but they could be used for anything. And you've seen that already. You can see NFTs can be used for like sharing Minecraft recipes or for sharing Fortnite cosmetics or whatever. And that's totally fine because the interface is still like, can I transfer it? Yes. Who owns it? What is the history of ownership? What is its price? You know what I mean? It doesn't matter that it turns out that it's like a Fortnite pair of shoes or something at the back. You know what I mean? So NFT. So yes, I'd say the answer is yes. A library of like contracts or interfaces to contracts, and then a whole lot of implementations of contracts, which could be based on what domain they're in or the industry that they're in.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, that's a very thorough. Yes, I really appreciate the in-depth answer. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah. So Tom, I've got a question. I suppose it's really to try and figure out the boundaries of. So we're sitting in front of a client, and the client's got a particular problem, and we're trying to say, well, where will Web3 add value, and where won't it? So, so the question is, what is a good, and this is really a rule of thumb, and everyone can actually take a stab at it. It's a rule of thumb question. When is it appropriate, and the sort of use case, it's appropriate to go Web3, and another use case saying, no, bad idea.
Yeah, yeah. It's like such a good question, Jake, and I think it's the one that I struggle with the most. Because quite a lot of it is when you take Web3 to that extreme and you go, oh, everything is peer-to-peer and all transactions are just between two parties, you often go, well, then what is the, how do I tell this bad news to bank, or to bank that actually there's no, really what Web3 is trying to do is trying to marginalize the middleman or make the middleman like perfectly efficient, which means effectively organizations like banks, brokers, etc., are like marginalized down to just being a participant in an open marketplace, right? And so for me, that often is like, okay, sure, you have to start to reinvent really what is your product and what is your service, and why would people use this thing in a world where anyone could offer that same service? So yeah, like I'd love to hear anyone else's comment on this. I do think there's a few interesting angles, but for me, often I do struggle with that. I don't know how I would describe this to like our traditional customer. It makes a lot of sense from a startup perspective or in the startup ecosystem, because you could build a Web3 technology company. You could be someone who's providing smart contracts on a particular network, or you could design your own network, et cetera, et cetera. But why would this, how do you make it feel safe to like a traditional or legacy business like a bank? And the question is, I don't really know. The answer is, I don't really know.
I'd like to just check what you guys think. I mean, can't we use history as an example of a model that might work? So look at gold. Even with fiat currency, where we all are using it, in times of high volatility or unrest or whatever, it becomes a store of value that people trust for various reasons. So maybe the role of it will move into some sort of space like that in a time of volatility or something, you fall back, but other times for convenience or stuff, then we're on the Web3. So just a thought there, which is we have an example of gold as a store. Why not assume, in some part that our next chapter will be similar, and then they still retain that role, but then they can focus on like, well, they don't have to be the fast distributed store of transactions or purveyor of transactions. They've got another role, which is just be valuable or remain alive during wars or something, but then they can focus on that, right? And it's like, well, then make sure you stay alive and you don't have to worry about this other stuff.
So Luke, you've made me think of something that I've recently experienced. I'm sure a lot of people have. It's travel in the era of COVID. So what we had all of these travel sites doing like booking your travel and your tickets really easy. COVID hit. I went straight back to travel agents. I can't deal with the complexity. The systems can't deal with the complexity. And the travel agent now starts adding huge value because they can see the gaps. In other words, they're dealing with more exceptions than rules. And so there's the value add in going back to the good old travel agent. And maybe what we're saying, maybe within that space, it's not a great advertising space to say, like, it's for the, if things don't go well, then you're there to pick up the crap. But anyway,
Yeah. There is definitely, just to add one more thing back to banking, there is a very interesting problem that having the ability to be in charge of my own value protection is not actually a comfortable place, right? So this concept of like banks are custodial, if you think about it, like we put our salaries and we have our money and our home loans and stuff like that in a bank because we can't, like we would fire ourselves to want to protect those things. Like I don't want to protect, like I wouldn't want to get my salary in a brown paper bag every month and then have to protect it myself, right? And keep it somewhere and then somehow use it to pay other people. That's hard. And that's what crypto does take us to. When you create a new crypto wallet, you get the private key and it's your private key. If you lose that thing, you lose the funds in that wallet. And so there is, like, banks certainly could offer custodial services, which is like, well, offload the protection of that key to us because you can trust us. And I'd say, yes, that's a very good use case. Like that's something I would want to use in the future. But I don't know if that is, and then at the same time you're saying, well, but then at the cost of no longer taking part in any transaction, bank, you're just a protector of private keys. Like they're probably not keen on that conversation.
Yeah. So I'm handing over to, thanks, Tom. So I'm handing over to Peter.
Hey, Tom. So yeah, really interesting talk. I was wondering during 2020, the whole folding at home, like donation compute scheme, as people were home and we really sort of had some kind of unity around fighting the virus. The amount of people donating compute to that project, at some point it exceeded the top 500 supercomputers in the world. So that to me proves the point that people will spend compute, electricity, hardware, money without necessarily wanting something in return if they believe in the thing that it at least purports to give you. So I'm wondering, if we as a society, for example, say, okay, we want provably fair elections or whatever, and we think blockchain is a way to achieve that, do you envision something like that where I can donate my computing power to make sort of trust in these things like elections more like technically provable, stuff like that? So I'm just wondering, do you see it being used not just because I can get some coin that is valuable in some sense, but like actually because I care about the outcome more than the
Yeah, totally. And actually, you remember that it's still a value transfer thing. So if you're donating your compute, you're still earning something, which is like you're just donating whatever it is that you earned back to a cause, right? So like that's for me, it's the same thing.
Sure.
So yes, I mean, one example I can think of is Cardano has this idea of stake pools. Actually, lots of any proof of stake blockchain. Ethereum is not yet one, or it's kind of transitioning to a proof of stake. But any blockchain that is built on proof of stake has this concept of a thing called a stake pool. And stake pools are run by stake operators and then delegators delegate to a stake pool. So fundamentally what it means is I can earn interest on crypto. So if I'm holding, for example, ADA, which is the Cardano cryptocurrency, if I've got 100 ADA, I can delegate from my wallet to a stake pool and then earn kind of like a percentage of the fees earned by that stake pool. The stake pool does end up fundamentally mining transactions on the blockchain, but not in a proof of work type of way. So they don't add a lot of compute to the network. They just add a minimum amount just to calculate a block. But they earn a fee for doing that, and their probability of being selected to mine a block is based on the amount of stake delegated to them. So it's an interesting model that goes, like, it's probably worth another whole tech session as to how staking generally works. But the idea is I can fundamentally take my 100 ADA, stake it into a pool. I don't lose access to it. It still stays in my wallet, but I just mark it as being staked to some operator. And then I can earn a fee based on that. You don't have to earn a fee, though. So what I've seen is there are stake pools out there which are like charity pools, or they're associated with an organization. So, for example, it could be like the WWF, the World Wildlife Foundation, could run a stake pool, and they say, hey, if you want to help us stake your ADA to us, you're not going to earn anything, but we'll use this directly in our non-profit way. So it just means like I can choose to stake my wallet into any old stake pool, and then if I earn fees or not is based on whoever it is that I'm staking on. So it ends up being that stake pools independently advertise themselves, either to earn higher prices or potentially because they're linked to some sort of cause, which I think is quite cool.
Yeah, that is quite cool. Yeah, thanks for that answer. Jared, I also see your comment about why voting with blockchain or electronic voting in general might be a bad idea. I'll have a look.
Yeah, the fundamental problem there is the anonymity of a wallet. So when I anyone can create a wallet and any number of them. So having, a wallet doesn't map directly to one identity. So there are challenges around KYC from a voting perspective. So there needs to be some sort of way of registering a human to a single wallet potentially, or some way of identifying a single human in a voting scenario. And that's fundamentally one of the problems. There are other interesting problems there. There's something called quadratic voting, which maybe tries in some cases to alleviate some of those problems, but it's an unsolved problem.
Yeah, we need like worldwide role-based access control where I can vote in South Africa, but I can't vote in Sweden.
Correct.
Yeah, we need
and so there are many approaches to try and do that, is to link an identity to a crypto address, like to a wallet. And of course, it's totally doable. You can offer the service yourself if you like. The problem is, how do you build a critical mass of people? How would you get the entire globe to adopt one approach to KYC when you've got 170 governments who all disagree on how to identify a person? So the problem is like a social one. It's not a technological one.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Ramton, you've had your hand up for a while. Go for it.
Cool, thanks, Jake. So as my question builds on what Jake asked earlier regarding basically the use of like how would you present a Web3 to a client today? So in that sense, like what would be the benefit of creating a dApp? Like what today, like right now, can we dAppify, and why would we do that? And should you dAppify everything? Like, will that replace web apps, or like what's the future of that? Like, should you even do it?
So you're naughty because you say, should we do it today? And then what is the future of it? And they're very different. They're very different answers. What should you do today with Web3 is probably very little, because it's very expensive, unadopted, and it's in this domain that we don't understand very well. So should you do it today for a client? Our answer is probably no. So what should we do today is we should learn about it, and we should try and understand use cases, and maybe prototype and build ideas around it. I would say for client stuff, unless a client is saying to you, hey, we are building this Web3 thing, and do you have skills, and can you help us? Then I would say, yeah, 100%, let's try and understand it. But I don't think it makes sense yet to be building Web3 stuff for the numerous problems that exist. However, into the future, we don't know, but I would say, yes, it definitely looks interesting, and it looks like we're getting closer to like being able to understand the feasibility of it. I don't know if that helps. I mean, what is your view on it? What are your thoughts?
I thought I'd come to you and you share your view with us. I thought that's what we're doing here.
Yeah, well, I'd like to hear other people's views on the way.
So the reason I'm asking that is because like a lot in the space alone, like the NFT thing, a lot of it is so much hype that you don't really know what to take seriously and what you should focus on. So it's like, if you want to get into Web3 and let's say dAppify something, it's like the way it stands today, like how do you start looking at it to future-proof it? So that's where it becomes kind of tricky for me, because it's like, even though it's technically distributed, it's like the internet, right? It is distributed and decentralized, but somehow we manage to centralize all of that. So it's like, how do you efficiently create a dApp that doesn't become centralized? Today, or would you not?
They are used. Well, no, I think it depends. If you're doing it for, it depends what you're trying to do, I suppose. I would say as a synthesis, it's like learn. That we've got to maximize our learning and understanding so that we can help, make those, answer those questions that people may have, right? I don't yet know what the answer is to all of those questions. I would probably say no, unless you're in a very high risk space. However, I think that there's loads of interesting use cases that are like worth building and playing with and understanding. I'd say that there's kind of two successful. Where are people making money today, right? is the question. The answer is probably the market, like the NFT space with marketplaces. I would say OpenSea is making a lot of money. Are investors in NFTs making money? I don't know yet. Probably not. They're probably net losing money. We do see NFTs being sold for like massive amounts of money, and that's great. So there's lots of investment. Is there any returns? I would say probably no. And we're seeing like a lot of fraud happening, like people buying and selling the same NFT between themselves in order to hike up the price. And that comes back to the identity and voting problem. Is like we can't identify the individuals at the end. So if we just look at the pure market and we see 2 transactions, we don't know that that thing is actually legitimate. It could just be me selling it to myself for $1 million, and it's like, and then selling, you know, and trying to just hike the price, right? So that's a problem. So NFTs for sure, but who's making money? OpenSea is legitimately making money, right? They or Artifact or one of the other marketplaces, because they are offering smart contracts. They're not buying and selling NFTs. They are providing the marketplace to buy and sell NFTs. So they're taking a cut off of every one of those transactions, including the fraudulent ones, right? But they're making money. Who else is making money? I would say the DeFis who are swapping between tokens or offering like the Uniswap protocol or Curve Finance, where you are able to swap between tokens and creating there's something called liquidity pools. Like those providers are probably making money because they are taking a fee on every swap between 2 tokens, if that makes sense. So and those are legitimate. I don't know if they're legitimate, but they're not creating value from nothing. They are taking value from one side, providing it on the other, and taking a small fee. And actually, you could think of that as being like a middleman in some respect. It isn't actually, though, because it runs autonomously on the blockchain. They don't participate. They just provided a contract on the side. But those are like probably the only 2. Into the future, are there more? Yes, I would say I think there are. I think there are interesting opportunities. I don't know what they are yet. Well, I don't know which the successful ones are yet. I don't know.
That sounds like admin.
What do other people think around that question? Because I think it's a very good question, very open-ended as well. Anyone else want to add to that or try answer that question of Ramton's?
Guess not. Until 10 years.
Maybe.
They're selling shovels, Tom, though. That model you described, they're still selling shovels, right? In the gold.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jared, you've had your hand up. Do you want to...
Cool. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, so I have a few questions, but also a few comments, I guess. So I'm not sure if you've read Moxie's blog post about Web3. Have you?
Yeah.
And what did you think about it? Because in that he really makes the point that, when we moved from Web 1 to Web 2, a lot of things became centralized, but that had a lot of issues around privacy. And with Web 3, the idea is that everything becomes decentralized. But in a lot of the discussions that we've had thus far, the centralization has a big benefit because in the bank example, they protect your money. If you use other platforms, they do things like discoverability, trust, and kind of moderate civility if you look at like social media. So any bad actors, whether they're like, racists or bigots or whatever, they tend to get thrown off the platforms, etc. And other kind of criminal behavior from a banking perspective is also generally something is done about that because there's a concerted effort to do that. But however, when it's decentralized, like how does that actually work? So my question, I guess, is, many people in the tech community think that kind of Web3 is not only overhyped, but they think a lot of the ideas that come with it, whether it's NFTs or these play-to-pay models in gaming, etc., are kind of very scammy and they don't really have any intrinsic value. And it's wondered what your thoughts are and whether you agree with that or not.
I do, and I would say when I read Moxie's his article, it's absolutely like these are issues that are, he lists a bunch of issues which are still to be solved. These are like the end idea is still a good one, I think. The implementation of the technology today is not yet there. So like the ability to include regulators in it, solving the identity problem, being able to avoid fraud, those things can all be, you can actually think of models where you would implement that in terms of Web3. It just doesn't exist well today, you know what I mean? And so that's why we are seeing, like, absolutely, like NFTs are like, cool, they're a use case. Are they a good use case? I would say no, like it doesn't really make sense, but it does work. And so I suppose people have created a marketplace out of it, and we're seeing all the bad stuff coming out of it. However, the end idea is actually quite sound. So you could sit down and on a whiteboard solve every one of Moxie's problems that he lists in terms of Web3. You actually can do that. There's no fundamental problem in it. There's just problems in the implementations today. You know what I mean? Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does.
Tom, that story sounds a little bit like Docker. You know, in my mind, whether it's right or wrong, I'm not sure. But in my mind, Docker like put together, you know, 3, maybe 4 elegant solutions at the same time in the same place. To like the, you know, the image sharing, the CPU, you know, I don't know, like it was a combination, and that's what you guys are talking about. Sounds like we just need to find that one group of people that does put the solutions together, and then, you know, and then there'll be like this awakening of progress there. But it doesn't sound like there yet. That's what I'm hearing though.
Yeah, and it's like if we zoom back to 2012 and we were talking about cloud, you know, anyone like Moxie could have written an article saying, guys, cloud is crap. It's like, it's got privacy issues. Look at this issue here. You're sending your data over the internet. There's regulatory problems. There were all sorts of problems back in, you know, any disruptive technology, you can list all the issues. And it's like over time, they slowly get solved, right? Like the fundamental idea is a good one. There's no like law of physics type of problem with the idea of Web3, nor was there with cloud computing. It was just like, there were good examples of where people hadn't yet bothered to solve some like proper issues, you know, but over time they were incentivized to do it. You know what I mean? So I'd say we're in that stage of Web3. I don't know if that's a good thing, but I mean, do you agree with that, Jared? So like back in 2010, people would say maybe don't use cloud because there's all sorts of problems. There were public S3 buckets and there was like, I don't know, all sorts of issues there. But over time, we're now saying, actually, no, do use cloud. It fundamentally was a good idea, even back in 2010. It was just there were bad examples of that implementation.
I think the key issue there is that I think the kind of use cases and how everything will work and what the risks are need to become clearer, and then I think people can make better decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So I think, Michael, you're going to be the last to go on, and then Luke, I'm just going to ask you to wrap up on my behalf because I need to prepare for another meeting.
Sure.
Yes, cool. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks. Ciao.
Awesome. No pressure being the last one. So specifically also with things like NFTs, because they're very prevalent, a lot of them are offering utility for holding them. For example, like you mint an NFT and then you own the IP to a video game of these creations and stuff like that. Do you consider that a viable use case for NFTs? Do you think that is a good or a proper use of the NFTs as opposed to just money laundering or something? And then additionally on that, do you foresee us receiving or getting to the point there where like Facebook's metaverse becomes a thing and everybody goes, you know, super digital, and, you know, owning a piece of land that's an NFT becomes super viable and stuff like that? Do you foresee us getting to that extremity?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So the first one is like the NFTs as some kind of redeemable thing. I think that's a good use case. I do. I think that is a great use case. So like, for example, like you could imagine that maybe if I'm holding this token and the token could be an NFT, it doesn't really matter. Remember, NFT is just an interface to some contract on the blockchain. It just happens to be a sellable, transferable URL or something. I think that's literally what ERC 721 does. It captures a URL and it has an owner and it has the ability to transfer that thing. That's it. And so you can imagine many different kinds of sellable URLs. with that. So NFTs with images make sense, but like it could also be something else. Like it could be if I buy a ticket to go and watch a concert or something. Technically, they could issue that back to me as a token because it's got some URL, it's like an identity, and then it has the ownership and it's transferable. The question is whether, like, are concert tickets transferable? I would say probably no, actually. Most of the time when I buy a ticket, like they don't want me to on-sell it. And in fact, that might even be illegal, like the scalping market. So is it a good use for NFTs? No, NFTs are actually these transferable, sellable things. You have to think, first of all, so that, for me, that limits it already. And if you're trying to use NFT to solve a problem where transferability is not part of what it should be doing, then NFTs are the wrong solution, actually. Because we were thinking about, like earlier, maybe certifications. When you complete your AWS certification, shouldn't you be given an NFT? Like, well, are certifications transferable? Can I sell my certification to someone else? And I'd say, no, I don't think you can. And so NFT actually is not a good solution. But is there another solution using Web3? Yes, there probably is. It's like TBC, to be designed, to be developed. Develop your own standard for certifications, which is not ERC 721. Use some other thing, which is where like owning it is non-transferable, but maybe identifying the person, the owner on the end, is a mandatory requirement. So this can only be earned by someone who is identified by AWS maybe, or by some authority. That's a different kind of contract. And then I've forgotten your second. Does that give you some idea of why NFTs are crap for all things? They're not good for all things. They're only good for things which have got a URL and are transferable. That's what they're good for. That does. And then your second question was around like digital goods. I'd say, yeah, that's a pretty interesting use case because it's like I could earn, maybe I pay Nike to buy some Nike shoes and they appear in Fortnite and I can add them to my character. They're great. Can those Nikes transfer to any other platform? Today they can't, but into the future, wouldn't it be nice if I bought those pair of Nike shoes that they would transfer to Roblox maybe, or to the metaverse into the future? And then it's like, yeah, that's a good use of smart contracts, actually. I think that is quite interesting because from an ownership perspective, I own the Nikes, they're decoupled from the platform in which I use them. So this is quite a cool idea.
So Tom, I'd like to just add to that. So the problem also comes in with NFTs does not entitle you to copyright. So you can, for example, make something in another game or something. That doesn't mean you actually own the copyright to it. So it's actually not. So you can maybe have like the NFT to a screenplay, but you may not actually own the ideas and stuff of the actual screenplay. So that doesn't entitle you to go and make a movie. So there's quite a few questions to like solve. So it's quite like, it's quite complicated still because it raises it's interesting for me. It like raises like, where does like ownership really start and end in regards to stuff like that? So I just wanted to bring up the like case of copyright and like ownership, because I know that what people have been doing is they've been stealing other people's artwork and like selling as NFTs, but that doesn't actually entitle, like it's almost like an illegitimate NFT because that's not the artwork itself. The creator of the artwork actually still has the like original file, for example, maybe the like PSD or something. So it becomes like a complicated situation with regards to things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And we still have to use our copyright machine that we've created. No one has declared that NFTs are, at a global level, that no court has found an NFT yet to cede copyright ownership of that item. And they probably won't because, as you say, I can download the image and I can hash it myself and come up with the same hash, put that on the blockchain. That means nothing. I mean, absolutely. But I mean, if you had a trail that takes you all the way back to the creator, so if I could see for certain that this item, this NFT that I have, and looking at the blockchain, I can see an ownership transfer from a provably that is rooted provably by Banksy, then probably I do have a claim because I know that on this, I went through we could see on the blockchain, Banksy put this up for sale. We don't know that it's Banksy, but we've got an address. And if we can somehow off-chain verify that this address belongs to Banksy, or that it's on Wikipedia or something, then I can go, yes, that is Banksy's thing. And any court would say, yes, that is Banksy's address. And then I can see the sale of that thing to me. And we know that contract was like Banksy was offering ownership of intellectual property transfer based on it. Then I probably, then actually blockchain is quite a good recordal of that because it's public and verifiable.
Camera settings.
Cool, guys. So Tom, thank you so much. I think as for myself, and I'm sure a lot of us, I really enjoyed this novel way that you did the tech session. Cool. Being able to not know anything 3 days ago about this topic, and then after watching your video, just allowing me to participate in the conversation where it wasn't all complete gibberish. I think that's really great. So
awesome.
Tom, thanks for that. That inspiration on how to do these. There are so many comments, Tom, that maybe
I'll go through them.
Yeah, and maybe we need another session, Tom, for you to answer, or maybe offline, like mail or something. But it would be cool to hear your views on that. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys. I hope you all have a great weekend. And let me know if you've got any questions. I'm very keen to discuss this a bit more. Maybe we should create a channel in Teams. I don't know, something like that. I think maybe we do have a channel. Anyway, yeah. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much.